The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cracked asphalt of Pearl's Diner parking lot in Clearwater, Nevada. The small town sat nestled in the valley between two mountain ranges, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, or at least thought they did. The diner itself was a relic from the 1950s, its neon sign flickering weakly even in daylight, promising "the best coffee in Nevada," in faded red letters. The note was tucked under the chrome mirror of the most intimidating motorcycle on the street. A jet-black Harley-Davidson Fatboy, its paint job so perfect it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The Hells Angels insignia gleamed on its tank, a symbol that made most people cross to the other side of the street. The bike sat like a predator at rest, all raw power and barely contained violence. Cole Shadow Bennett returned from the diner, carrying the bitter taste of truck stop coffee and the memory of Pearl's famous apple pie. He was halfway to his bike when he noticed it, a small piece of notebook paper, the kind with blue lines and a pink border decorated with tiny hearts, folded carefully and wedged under his mirror. His first instinct was irritation. Kids were always leaving notes on bikes, usually dares from their friends or juvenile attempts at humor. But something made him pause. The way the paper was folded, precise and careful. The way it was placed, not carelessly tossed but deliberately positioned where he couldn't miss it. Cole's weathered hands, scarred from years of motorcycle maintenance, bar fights in dimly lit roadhouses, and a past he'd spent a decade trying to forget, reached for the note with surprising gentleness, as if it might disintegrate under rough handling. He unfolded it slowly, his dark eyes scanning the careful childish handwriting. "Dear motorcycle man, *I think the bad men are hurting my teacher. She has bruises and she's scared. Nobody believes me because I'm just a kid, but I see things. Please help Miss Rebecca. She's nice and she doesn't deserve to be scared. From Lily, age 8, P.S. I'm sorry if I'm not supposed to touch your bike. It's very cool. Cole stood absolutely still, the note trembling slightly in his hands, though whether from the afternoon breeze or his own reaction, he couldn't say. He read it once, twice, 3 times, each word burning itself into his memory. The handwriting was painstakingly neat, the letters formed with the careful precision of a child who'd taken the time to make sure every word was legible. This wasn't a prank. This was a plea. "Shadow, you good?" Marcus Bolt Anderson emerged from Pearl's Diner, the glass door swinging shut behind him with a pneumatic hiss. He carried 2 paper cups of coffee, steam rising from the small opening in the plastic lids. Bolt was shorter than Cole by a few inches but built like a fire hydrant, compact, solid, immovable. His bald head gleamed in the afternoon sun, and his graying beard was braided in the Viking style. He saw Cole's expression, the way his friend had gone completely still, and his casual demeanor shifted immediately. 20 years riding together meant Bolt could read Shadow's moods like a book. "What's wrong?" Bolt's voice dropped, took on the edge it got when trouble was brewing. Without a word, Cole handed him the note. Bolt set down both coffees on the bike seat and read, his jaw progressively tightening with each line. At 45, Marcus Bolt Anderson had been riding with the Hells Angels for 2 decades, long enough to know that men like them, covered in leather and tattoos, riding loud bikes that shattered the quiet of small towns, looking like society's nightmares made flesh, weren't usually who people turned to for help. Especially not 8-year-old girls who probably still believed in fairy tales and happy endings. "Kid wrote this?" Bolt's voice was rough with something that might have been surprise or anger or both. "Left it on my bike." Cole took the note back, folded it carefully, slid it into the inner pocket of his leather vest, right over his heart. "Could be nothing," Bolt said, but his tone suggested he didn't believe it. "Kids have active imaginations. Could be the teacher bumped into something and the kids making up stories. Could be, Cole agreed, his gaze drifting across the street to where Clearwater Elementary School sat behind a chain-link fence. The building was old, probably built in the 60s, all brown brick and narrow windows. The playground equipment looked newer, bright primary colors that seemed almost garish against the drab building. But his gut, the same instinct that had kept him alive through 2 brutal deployments in Afghanistan where every dusty road might hide an IED and every friendly face might be the last thing you saw, the same instinct that had served him through a decade in the MC where the wrong word to the wrong person could start a war, that gut told him something different. Or could be a little girl watching her teacher get hurt, Cole said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of experience, and nobody's listening because she's just a kid. Bolt studied his friend carefully. Cole had been managing the club's legitimate businesses for 2 years now, part of the Hells Angels' slow evolution from outlaws to something more sustainable, something that might last beyond the next police crackdown or gang war. The club owned a chain of motorcycle repair shops, a few bars, some rental properties. Legal money, clean money, the kind that wouldn't send you back to prison. But Cole still carried his past like a weight on his shoulders. Former Army Ranger, former enforcer for the club, former a lot of things that left shadows in his eyes and scars on his soul. What do you want to do? Bolt asked carefully, knowing that once Shadow made a decision, heaven and earth wouldn't move him. Cole looked across the street at Clearwater Elementary School. The afternoon dismissal was happening, a steady stream of children pouring out of the building like water from a broken dam. Parents waited in cars or stood in small clusters, chatting about PTA meetings and soccer practices. And there, standing near the main entrance, slightly apart from the other teachers, was a woman. Even from this distance, Cole could see her clearly. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, slim build, wearing a long-sleeved blouse despite the warm Nevada afternoon. She stood watchful, her posture speaking of tension held in check. She held herself like someone waiting for a blow, shoulders slightly hunched, weight balanced on the balls of her feet as if ready to move at any moment. Cole had seen that posture before, in combat zones and in the mirror during his worst years. "I want to find out who Miss Rebecca is," Cole said quietly, his voice carrying the unmistakable note of decision. "And I want to know if that kid is right." Rebecca Parker was tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. It was a bone-deep, soul-crushing exhaustion that had become her constant companion over the past 8 months. She stood outside Clearwater Elementary, watching the last stragglers from afternoon dismissal, and tried to ignore the persistent ache in her ribs where David had shoved her into the kitchen counter the night before. It was an accident, she told herself for the 1000th time, the words automatic now, practiced. He didn't mean it. He was stressed about work. He'd apologized afterward, hadn't he? Brought her ice, told her he loved her, promised it would never happen again. Except it always happened again. The bruises told a different story than her rationalizations. So did the way she'd started flinching at sudden movements, the way she'd stopped wearing short sleeves or anything that showed her arms, the way she'd perfected the art of lying with a smile. Her co-workers thought she was just private. Her family lived 3 states away and believed everything was fine because that's what she told them during their brief phone calls. "Miss Parker." Rebecca startled, then caught herself, forced her expression into something approaching calm. Lily Sanchez stood at her elbow, her small face serious in a way that 8-year-olds shouldn't be. Lily was one of the brightest students Rebecca had ever taught, observant and thoughtful, the kind of child who noticed everything and processed it with an intelligence that sometimes unnerved the adults around her. "Yes, Lily." Rebecca's smile felt brittle on her face, like it might crack and fall off in pieces. "Are you okay?" The question was direct, concerned, those big brown eyes seeing far too much. Of course, sweetie. The lie came easily now, smoothly. Why do you ask? You're holding your side funny. Like it hurts. Rebecca's heart stuttered in her chest. She hadn't even realized she was doing it, one hand pressed gently against her ribs where the bruise was darkest. She dropped her hand immediately, clasped both hands in front of her in what she hoped was a casual pose. I'm fine, Lily. Just sore from yoga. Another lie, smooth as silk. She'd never been to a yoga class in her life. Lily didn't look convinced. Her small face carried an expression of skepticism that was almost comical in someone so young, but Rebecca couldn't appreciate the humor. Before the girl could press further, her mother's car pulled up to the curb, a sensible Honda Civic with a car seat in the back for Lily's younger brother. As Lily climbed into the back seat, carefully putting on her seatbelt, she looked back at Rebecca through the window. Her expression was far too knowing for 8 years old, carrying a weight of understanding that made Rebecca's stomach clench with something that might have been fear or shame or both. Rebecca's phone buzzed in her pocket, the vibration making her flinch. She pulled it out with hands that wanted to shake. A text from David, 3 simple sentences that made her blood run cold. Where are you? Traffic is no excuse. Dinner better be ready when I get home. Her hands trembled as she typed back, deleting and retyping twice to make sure there were no errors that might set him off. Leaving school now. I'll have it ready. I love you. She hit send and stood there for a moment, staring at the screen, waiting to see if he would respond. When he didn't, she wasn't sure if that was better or worse. Rebecca didn't notice the 2 men on motorcycles parked across the street, engines silent, watching. Didn't see the way one of them, the taller one with the scarred jaw and dark eyes, watched her with focused intensity that would have terrified her if she'd known about it. She was too caught up in her own fear, too busy calculating how fast she could get home, what she could make for dinner that would be quick enough, good enough, perfect enough to avoid another incident. She got into her sensible Toyota Camry, the car David had approved of because it was practical and appropriate for a teacher, and started the engine. As she pulled out of the parking lot, she checked her mirrors obsessively, a habit born from months of feeling watched, feeling hunted. She never saw the 2 Harleys that fell in behind her, keeping a careful distance. The surveillance Cole followed Rebecca Parker home, his Harley's engine a low rumble that he kept deliberately quiet, staying 3 cars back from her sensible Toyota Camry. Bolt rode alongside him, slightly ahead and to the left, his own bike a mirror of Cole's. They'd done surveillance work before, both in the service and after. They knew how to be invisible, how to follow without being seen. The route took them through the older part of Clearwater, past the historic downtown with its antique shops and tourist trap cafes, out toward the newer subdivisions that had sprung up during the brief boom years before the recession. Rebecca's house was in one of these developments, a small ranch-style home on Maple Ridge Drive that could have been transplanted from any suburb in America. The house was well maintained, Cole noted. The lawn was neat, edged with precision. Flower beds lined the front walk, full of cheerful yellow marigolds and purple petunias. A small American flag hung from a holder next to the front door. White curtains in the windows, a welcome mat that said, "Bless this home." Everything about it screamed normal, peaceful, safe. Cole had learned long ago that appearances were the most dangerous lies. They parked 2 blocks away, on a street that ran parallel to Maple Ridge, and walked back through a small greenbelt that separated the housing developments. The evening was warm, the sun just beginning its descent toward the mountains. Families were having dinner, the sounds of television and conversation drifting through open windows. Someone was grilling hamburgers, the smell making Cole's stomach rumble. They found a position in the shadows behind a large pine tree in the neighbor's yard, partially concealed by a fence but with a clear line of sight through Rebecca Parker's kitchen window. The window was open, probably to let in the evening breeze, and they could see inside clearly. Rebecca moved around the kitchen with quick, nervous movements, like a bird that knew the cat was watching. She was making dinner. It looked like chicken and vegetables, something simple. Her movements were efficient, practiced, but there was a tension in her shoulders that spoke volumes to someone who knew how to read body language. Then a man entered the frame. David Preston was tall, probably 6'2" or 6'3", broad-shouldered in the way of men who spent time in the gym without being obsessive about it. He wore slacks and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, the uniform of a million middle management types. His hair was neat, his face clean-shaven. He looked like someone who would coach Little League or serve on the church council or help his neighbors with yard work. He said something. Cole couldn't hear the words, but he could see Rebecca's shoulders tense further, could see the way she went very still, like prey hoping the predator won't notice it. David moved closer, crowding Rebecca against the counter. His body language was aggressive, dominating, taking up space in a way that left her nowhere to go. Rebecca tried to move away, to slip past him, and his hand shot out with snake-strike speed, grabbing her arm and yanking her back roughly enough that her head snapped on her neck. "Son of a bitch," Cole breathed, his voice barely audible even to Bolt standing right next to him. Through the window, they watched David's mouth move, clearly yelling. Rebecca tried to pull away and he shoved her, hard enough that she stumbled against the counter. The same counter, Cole realized with cold fury, where she'd been hurt the night before. When Rebecca reappeared in frame a few moments later, she was holding her wrist carefully, and there were tears streaming down her face that she was trying desperately to wipe away. David sat down at the kitchen table as if nothing had happened, pulled out his phone, and started scrolling with complete indifference. Rebecca stood at the stove, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs, and continued making dinner with hands that trembled so badly she nearly dropped the pan. Cole's fists clenched so hard his knuckles cracked like gunshots. Beside him, Bolt's jaw was set like granite, his breathing carefully controlled in the way of men trying very hard not to explode into violence. "We calling the cops?" Bolt asked quietly, his voice rough with suppressed rage. "And say what?" "We were stalking a teacher." Cole shook his head, forcing himself to think tactically rather than emotionally. "She'd deny everything anyway. They always do at first. Need to protect him, or protect themselves, or they're just so beaten down they can't see a way out. So what's the play, Shadow?" Cole thought of that note, of careful childish handwriting and a little girl brave enough to ask a stranger for help because all the adults around her weren't paying attention. "We watch," he said finally, pulling out his phone and starting to record video through the kitchen window. "We document everything. We build a case so solid she can't deny it and he can't weasel out of it." He recorded 3 minutes of footage, David sitting at the table, scrolling his phone with complete indifference while Rebecca served him dinner with shaking hands. The way she moved carefully around him, giving him space. The way she flinched when he moved suddenly to reach for the salt shaker. "And then?" Bolt prompted. Cole's smile was cold, without humor, the kind of expression that had made enemies think twice before starting something. "Then we make sure that bastard never touches her again." For days over the next 4 days, Cole Shadow Bennett and Marcus Bolt Anderson became ghosts in Rebecca Parker's life, shadows she never knew existed. They documented everything with the methodical precision of men trained in surveillance, men who understood that evidence had to be ironclad if it was going to matter. Day 1, Thursday evening, they watched David grab Rebecca's arm hard enough to leave finger-shaped bruises, pulling her roughly when she didn't respond fast enough to a question. Incident documented, 7:42 p.m. 2 photos, 1 video clip, 47 seconds. Day 2, Friday morning, Cole arrived early enough to watch Rebecca leave for work. She wore a long-sleeved cardigan despite the forecast calling for temperatures in the mid-80s. She moved carefully, getting into her car, like someone whose ribs hurt. Incident noted, bruising suspected but not visible. 8:07 a.m. Friday evening, David came home late, nearly 9 p.m., clearly drunk. Through the window they watched him yelling, backing Rebecca into a corner of the living room. She held up her hands in a placating gesture, and he slapped them away roughly. Incident documented, 9:17 p.m. 3 photos, 2 video clips totaling 3 minutes. Day 3, Saturday afternoon, the couple came home from grocery shopping. In the driveway, David grabbed the bags from Rebecca roughly, saying something that made her flinch. In the kitchen, while putting away groceries, he shoved her aside hard enough that she stumbled into the refrigerator. Incident documented, 2:34 p.m. 4 photos, 1 video clip, 89 seconds. Saturday night, the worst one yet. They couldn't hear the argument, but they could see it escalate through the living room window. David threw something, it looked like a TV remote, that narrowly missed Rebecca's head. When she tried to leave the room, he blocked her path, shoving her back toward the couch. The argument lasted 23 minutes. At one point David grabbed Rebecca by her hair. Incident fully documented, 8:45 p.m. to 9:08 p.m. 17 photos, 5 video clips totaling 18 minutes of footage. Day 4, Sunday, Rebecca didn't leave the house until late afternoon. When she finally emerged to get the mail, she wore sunglasses despite the overcast sky. Covering a black eye, Cole thought grimly. She walked stiffly, carefully, like everything hurt. Incident noted, suspected facial bruising and possible rib injury. 4:23 p.m. 6 photos. By Sunday evening, they had documented 17 separate incidents of physical aggression. 3 times David had grabbed Rebecca hard enough to definitely leave bruises. 4 times he'd shoved her. Twice he'd struck her, once the slapping motion with enough force to snap her head to the side, once what looked like a punch to her upper arm. Multiple incidents of intimidation, blocking her path, invading her space, using his size to dominate and control. Cole hated surveillance work. Hated the voyeuristic feeling of watching someone's private pain, of being an invisible witness to moments that should never happen. But he'd learned patience in the Rangers, learned that sometimes the best way to help was to wait for the right moment, to gather intelligence before action. He'd also learned that every moment you waited while watching someone suffer felt like an eternity. But he needed the evidence. Needed it to be undeniable. Because men like David Preston, they were skilled liars. They looked respectable, acted charming in public, had friends and jobs and lives that seemed normal. They knew how to make their victims look crazy, how to turn things around, how to play the victim themselves. So Cole watched and documented and waited, even though every instinct screamed at him to kick down that door and make David Preston understand what it felt like to be afraid. That moment came on Friday afternoon, exactly 1 week after Cole had first found the note. It was Lily Sanchez who broke Cole's careful surveillance, though he couldn't bring himself to be angry about it. Friday afternoon, dismissal time at Clearwater Elementary. Cole sat on his Harley across the street as he'd done every day that week, watching Rebecca Parker see her students off. She was wearing another long-sleeved blouse, and sunglasses again. The black eye hadn't completely faded yet, and even from across the street, Cole could see she was moving carefully, like her ribs still hurt from Saturday's incident. He was reviewing the surveillance footage on his phone, making sure all the timestamps were clearly documented, when a small voice said, "Are you going to help her?" Cole looked down to find Lily Sanchez standing next to his bike, her backpack nearly as big as she was, her expression an impossible combination of fierce determination and barely controlled fear. Up close, he could see she had the same big brown eyes from her mother, the same serious expression he'd seen through Rebecca's classroom window. Most kids would have been scared of him, he knew. Hell, most adults were. 6'3", 220, covered in tattoos and scars, with a face that had seen too much violence and showed it. He'd made grown men back down with just a look. But Lily Sanchez stood her ground, lifted her chin, and waited for an answer. "Lily, right?" Cole crouched down, making himself smaller, less intimidating. At this angle, they were almost eye to eye. "You wrote me that note?" "Yes." She clutched her backpack straps with white-knuckled intensity. "I know I'm not supposed to talk to strangers, and my mom would be really mad if she knew I was doing this, but Miss Parker is getting worse." "Worse how?" Cole kept his voice gentle, the same tone he'd used with frightened civilians in Afghanistan, the voice that said, "I'm listening, you're safe, tell me what you know." Today she couldn't write on the board very well because her hand was shaking, Lily said, the words tumbling out now that she'd started. "And she wore a turtleneck even though it's warm. She's covering things. Bruises, I think. And yesterday during PE, she couldn't demonstrate jumping jacks because she said her side hurt." Cole's heart clenched. Each detail Lily noticed was another piece of evidence, another confirmation of what he'd been watching all week. "She tries to hide it," Lily continued, her voice dropping to a whisper, as if she was sharing something shameful. "But I see things. I pay attention. My dad left when I was 5, and before he did, I remember he used to hurt my mom. Miss Parker moves like my mom used to move. Careful. Scared. 8 years old, and she recognized the signs of abuse because she'd lived through it herself." Cole felt something crack in his chest, some wall he'd built up threatening to crumble. "I told the principal," Lily said, and now there were tears in her eyes, frustration and helplessness that no child should have to feel. "Mrs. Henderson said Miss Parker probably just bumped into something, that I shouldn't worry. I told my mom, but she said I shouldn't make up stories about teachers, that it was disrespectful." "But you're not making it up," Cole said quietly. "No." The word came out fierce, almost angry. "I see things. I pay attention. Why don't adults believe kids? Just because I'm 8 doesn't mean I'm stupid or blind. If you believe in the power of observation, in trusting your instincts, and in the courage it takes to speak up when something feels wrong, then pause for a moment, like, comment, share, and subscribe to Bike Diaries. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from today because this story will remind you that heroes come in all sizes and sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important messages. "I believe you," Cole said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. "You did exactly the right thing, Lily. Sometimes adults miss important things because they're not looking close enough, or because they don't want to see things that are uncomfortable. But you're brave and you're smart, and you didn't let anyone tell you that what you saw wasn't real. Will you help her?" Lily's voice cracked, the tears spilling over now. "Please. She's the best teacher I've ever had. She makes reading fun, and she always has time to help when I don't understand something, and she smiles at us like she really means it. She doesn't deserve to be scared. She doesn't deserve to hurt." Cole glanced over Lily's head to where Bolt had appeared, drawn by the sound of voices. His writing brother's expression was carefully neutral, but Cole could see the muscle twitching in his jaw, the way his hands were clenched into fists. Bolt had a daughter of his own, 15 now and living with her mother in Oregon. He knew what it meant when kids noticed things adults missed. Bolt gave a small nod. Permission, agreement, solidarity. Cole looked back at Lily. Yeah, he said, his voice rough with emotion he usually kept locked down tight. We'll help her. But I need you to do something for me first, okay? What? I need you to keep being observant, keep noticing things. If you see anything that scares you or worries you, you tell your mom, okay? You tell a teacher you trust. You tell someone. He paused, making sure she was listening. But you stay away from Miss Parker's house. You don't try to follow her, you don't try to investigate on your own. Don't try to be a hero. But you're going to be a hero? Lily's question was direct, challenging. Cole's laugh was rough, without much humor. Kid, I'm a lot of things, but hero isn't usually one of them. Sometimes though, sometimes you see someone who needs help and you realize you can't walk away. You have to try to do something, even if you're scared, even if you don't know if it'll work. That's what a hero is, Lily said with the certainty of childhood, the unwavering belief that the world was simpler than adults made it. Someone who helps when other people won't. Before Cole could respond, Lily threw her arms around his neck in a quick, fierce hug that lasted maybe 3 seconds but somehow felt like it lasted longer. Then she pulled back, wiped her eyes, adjusted her backpack, and said, "Thank you, motorcycle man." She ran off before Cole could say anything else, her small form disappearing into the crowd of parents and children at the school's entrance. Bolt appeared at Cole's elbow, watching the girl go. "Well," he said after a moment, "guess we can't back out now." Never planned to, Cole stood, watching as Lily climbed into her mother's Honda Civic. Through the car window, he could see her saying something to her mother, probably explaining why she was late. The mother looked over toward Cole's bike, her expression concerned, protective. Cole made sure to look away, to not seem threatening. "So what's the plan, Shadow?" Bolt asked. Cole watched Rebecca Parker across the street, saw her carefully getting into her Toyota Camry, moving like every part of her hurt. Across town, David Preston was probably at work, maybe having a beer with colleagues, complaining about traffic or sports or his workload. Playing the part of a normal man living a normal life, while his girlfriend went home to cook his dinner and walk on eggshells and hide her bruises. "The plan," Cole said slowly, "is we stop watching and start acting. Tonight." Confrontation. Rebecca Parker knew something was wrong the moment David Preston walked through the door of their home that evening. His face was flushed, that telltale redness that meant he'd been drinking. His eyes had that slightly unfocused look, the one that made her stomach clench with fear because drunk David was unpredictable David. Sometimes he got maudlin, weepy, apologizing for everything. Sometimes he got amorous, pawing at her with rough hands. Sometimes he got angry. Tonight looked like angry. "Dinner ready," he demanded before he'd even fully closed the door behind him. "Almost. 5 more minutes." Rebecca kept her voice level, soothing, the same tone you might use with a spooked horse. She was at the stove, stirring pasta, trying to time everything perfectly. David liked his meals hot, ready the moment he sat down. Any deviation from his expectations could trigger an incident. "I said I wanted dinner ready when I got home." His voice had an edge to it, the anger just below the surface. "I know. I'm sorry. I got home as fast as I could, but there was traffic, always excuses with you." David moved into the kitchen, and Rebecca's heart rate spiked, adrenaline flooding her system. She knew this pattern, knew the signs. Drinking plus anger plus her failure to meet his expectations equaled pain. David, please. Just let me finish cooking. 5 minutes, I promise. She kept her eyes on the pasta, didn't look at him directly. Sometimes that helped, if he didn't feel challenged. Maybe I don't want dinner. He was right behind her now, close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath. Maybe I want you to stop being so fucking useless. His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with bruising force, the same wrist he'd grabbed Wednesday night. She gasped at the pain, the pasta spoon clattering into the sink. David, you're hurting me, good. Maybe you'll. The doorbell rang. They both froze, David's grip on her wrist loosening slightly in surprise. Nobody came to their house unannounced. Their neighbors kept to themselves, and Rebecca had long ago stopped inviting friends over, making excuses until people stopped asking. The doorbell rang again, followed by heavy knocking. Sharp, demanding, the kind of knock that said this person wouldn't be ignored. You expecting someone? David dropped her wrist and stalked toward the door, his anger shifting targets. No, Rebecca whispered, rubbing her wrist, feeling the hot throb of new bruises forming on top of old ones. David yanked open the door, not bothering with the peephole, ready to unleash his anger on whoever had dared to interrupt. What? Rebecca followed on shaky legs. Through the open door, she could see 2 large men standing on their front porch. They wore leather vests over jeans, both covered in tattoos that crawled up their arms and necks. The vests had patches, she couldn't read them all, but the Hells Angels insignia was unmistakable. Can I help you? David's voice carried false bravado, the tone of a man trying to sound tough while being very aware he might be outmatched. The taller of the 2 men, dark-haired with a jagged scar along his jaw and eyes that looked like they'd seen things no one should see, smiled. But it was the coldest expression Rebecca had ever witnessed, completely devoid of warmth or humor. It was the smile of a predator showing its teeth. David Preston, the tall man said, his voice carrying a rough edge that suggested violence was never far from the surface. My name's Cole Bennett. This is Marcus Anderson. We're here about your situation with Miss Rebecca Parker. Rebecca's blood turned to ice. They knew her name. They knew David's name. How did they know? Why were they here? David's confusion rapidly turned to anger, his face going red. I don't know what you're talking about. Get off my property before I call the cops. See, here's the thing. Cole didn't move, didn't even shift his weight. He just stood there, utterly calm, utterly confident. We've been watching your house for 4 days. We've documented 17 separate incidents of physical aggression. And tonight, right before we rang that doorbell, you were about to hurt her again. So no, we're not getting off your property. Not yet. Rebecca couldn't breathe. They'd been watching. For 4 days. Documenting everything. Part of her wanted to be horrified at the invasion of privacy, but a larger part was flooded with something she hadn't felt in 8 months, hope. Someone had seen. Someone knew. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't making it up. She wasn't weak or stupid or deserving of what David did to her. Someone had seen. That's harassment. David's voice went high and thin, the bluster cracking. I'll call the cops. Please do. Marcus pulled out his phone, held it up so David could see the screen. We've got video evidence, photos, timestamps, witness statements from a concerned student. The cops would absolutely love to see all of it. Want me to call them for you? David tried to slam the door, but Cole's boot was already in the jam, his heavy motorcycle boot blocking the door effortlessly. You're going to step outside, Cole said, his voice dropping to something low and dangerous, away from Miss Parker. "You're going to listen to what we have to say. And then you're going to make the smartest decision of your miserable life." "Or what?" David tried for threatening but landed somewhere around petulant. "We've already sent copies of everything we documented to the local police, the school board, and Miss Parker's family," Cole said, and Rebecca gasped at that. Her family knew. "The email is scheduled to send at midnight tonight unless I cancel it. So you can either come outside and talk to us like an adult, or we can let the legal system handle everything. Your choice. But either way, this ends tonight." For a long moment, David just stood there, and Rebecca could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. He was weighing options, looking for a way out, trying to figure out his next move. Finally, he stepped outside, pulling the door partially closed behind him, cutting Rebecca off from the conversation. Cole's voice came through the gap, "Rebecca. Lock the door. Call a friend. Call your parents. We'll handle this. You're safe now." Rebecca did as instructed, her hands trembling so badly she could barely work the deadbolt. She stumbled back into the living room and collapsed onto the couch, her whole body shaking with something between terror and relief. Through the front window, she could see the three men in the driveway. David was gesturing angrily, but the two bikers just stood there, unmoved, listening with expressions that made it clear David's words meant nothing. The conversation lasted 20 minutes. Rebecca couldn't hear most of it, but she saw David's body language shift from angry to defensive to something that looked like fear. At one point Marcus Anderson pulled out his phone and showed David something that made his face go white. Finally, David walked to his car without looking back. He got in, started the engine, and drove away. Just like that. Gone. Cole knocked gently on the door. "Miss Parker. It's safe now. Can we talk?" Rebecca opened the door slowly, every instinct screaming that this wasn't real, that it was some kind of trick. Up close, Cole Bennett was even more intimidating than she'd thought. Well over 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered with muscles that spoke of hard physical labor and harder living. His face was scarred, his knuckles scarred, tattoos covering both arms in intricate black and gray work. He looked like the kind of man mothers warned their daughters about. But his eyes were kind. "Are you hurt?" he asked immediately, his gaze sweeping over her with clinical assessment. "Do you need medical attention? Should we call an ambulance?" No. Not emergency hurt." Rebecca couldn't form coherent sentences. Her brain felt like it was short-circuiting. "Who are you? Why were you watching my house? I don't understand." "A little girl named Lily left me a note," Cole said simply, pulling a piece of folded notebook paper from his vest pocket. "She said she thought bad men were hurting her teacher. She asked me to help. So we did." Rebecca's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the floor right there in the entryway, tears streaming down her face in hot, unstoppable waves. Emma Rodriguez. Lily Sanchez, Cole corrected gently. Smart kid. Observant. Brave as hell. Oh God. Rebecca buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking with sobs that she'd been holding back for months. "I thought I was hiding it. I thought nobody knew." Lily noticed. Marcus crouched down, keeping a respectful distance, making himself smaller and less threatening. And she was right to be worried. Kids see things adults miss sometimes, especially when adults don't want to see things that are uncomfortable. "He's gone now," Cole added, also crouching so they were all at the same level. "We explained to him very clearly that we have documented evidence of abuse. We told him that evidence is currently set to be sent to multiple people, police, your employer, your family, at midnight unless we decide otherwise. And we told him that if he ever comes near you again, if he ever tries to contact you, if he even thinks about you wrong, we'll make sure everyone in this town and the next 3 towns over knows exactly what kind of man he is. And he'll have to deal with us, Marcus added, his voice carrying a promise of violence held carefully in check. We made it very clear what that would mean. Why would you do this? Rebecca whispered, looking up at these 2 strangers who had just turned her entire world upside down. You don't know me. You're Hell's Angels. You're. She trailed off, aware of how it sounded but unable to stop herself. Scary-looking criminals. Cole finished for her with a ghost of a smile. Yeah. Not usually the guys people trust to help. Most folks cross the street when they see us coming. He held out the note, let her read Lily's careful handwriting. But an 8-year-old girl saw something wrong, Cole continued softly, and she asked us for help. And we don't walk away from that. Not ever. If this story has touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Bike Diaries. We bring you stories that prove heroism comes in all forms, that courage isn't measured by size or age or appearance, and that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important messages. Tell us in the comments, have you ever noticed something important that others missed? Have you ever had the courage to speak up when it would have been easier to stay silent? Your story might inspire someone else to be brave. Rebecca read Lily's note through tears that made the words blur. The careful handwriting, the pure concern, the apology for touching the motorcycle. It broke something open in her chest, some dam she'd built to hold back all the fear and pain and shame. I should have left him months ago, she said, her voice breaking. I kept thinking it would get better. That he'd change. That if I just tried harder, if I was just better, he'd stop. But it kept getting worse, and I just kept making excuses. It's not your fault, Marcus said firmly, his voice carrying absolute conviction. Abuse never is. It doesn't matter what you did or didn't do. He chose to hurt you. That's on him, not you. You survived, Cole added. That takes strength. More strength than most people will ever need in their whole lives. Cole extended his hand to her. Let us help you up. And then let's talk about what comes next. There are resources, women's shelters, legal aid, counseling services. We'll connect you with people who specialize in this, who can help you navigate everything from restraining orders to divorce proceedings to finding a new place to live if you want one. And we'll make sure you're safe. That's non-negotiable. Rebecca took his hand, let him pull her gently to her feet. She swayed, dizzy from adrenaline crash and emotional overload, and Marcus steadied her with a gentle hand on her elbow. Why do you care? She asked again, needing to understand. Really? Cole was quiet for a moment, his scarred face going distant, remembering something that still hurt. Then he said, I grew up watching my old man beat my mother. It went on for years. When I was 15, she finally got the courage to leave him. Best decision she ever made, she says now. Saved both our lives. I swore then that if I ever saw another woman in that situation, if I ever had the chance to do something about it, I would. No matter what. Also, Marcus added with a slight smile, that kid Lily guilt-tripped us into helping. You don't disappoint an 8-year-old who's brave enough to approach a Hell's Angel and ask for help. That's just not something we can live with. Despite everything, the fear, the pain, the bruises that still ached, the trauma of 8 months of abuse, Rebecca found herself laughing through her tears. It came out as something between a sob and a giggle, slightly hysterical but real. She really is something special, Rebecca managed. So are you, Cole said quietly, his dark eyes holding hers with surprising gentleness. You teach kids. You inspire them. Lily clearly adores you. You survived months of hell and you still went to work every day, still smiled at your students, still made a difference in their lives. That's not weakness. That's strength. And you deserve to be safe. You deserve to be happy. And now you will be. 3 months later the Nevada sun was bright and warm, but not oppressively hot, as Rebecca Parker stood outside Clearwater Elementary at afternoon dismissal. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she wasn't tense. Wasn't watching over her shoulder. Wasn't calculating how fast she could get home, what she could cook for dinner, how she could avoid triggering an incident. She was free. The 3 months since that night had been a whirlwind. David had taken a job in California, encouraged by Cole's documentation being shared with his employer's HR department and the suggestion that he might want to relocate before things got legally complicated. The divorce had been finalized 2 weeks ago. Rebecca had found a good therapist, attended support group meetings, slowly started rebuilding the parts of herself that had been broken down over 8 months of abuse. She'd also found an apartment on the other side of town, a small 2-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a secure building with a doorman and cameras. Cole had helped her find it, had personally vetted the security, and had given her his personal phone number, just in case, though you won't need it. Miss Parker. Miss Parker. Lily Sanchez came running up, her backpack bouncing, waving a paper over her head like a flag. Her face was lit up with pure joy. Look. I got a 100 on my spelling test. That's wonderful, Lily. Rebecca crouched down, arms open, and Lily barreled into her for a hug. Rebecca squeezed the girl tight, fighting back tears. This child had saved her life. This brave, observant, wonderful child had seen something wrong and refused to stay silent, even when no adults would listen. I'm so proud of you, Rebecca said, pulling back to look at Lily's beaming face. You've been working so hard on your spelling. I've been practicing every night, Lily said proudly. Cole says attention to detail is important for everything, not just noticing when people need help. He says if you practice the small things, the big things get easier. Rebecca's eyebrows rose. Cole. The motorcycle man. Lily pointed across the street, and Rebecca's heart did a small flip in her chest. Cole Bennett sat on his massive Harley, one boot on the ground, arms crossed over his broad chest, watching the school dismissal with the same careful attention he probably gave to everything. He comes by sometimes, Lily continued, oblivious to Rebecca's reaction. Mom says he's making sure we're all safe. He checks on you, right? He helped you move. Mom said he's a good man, even if he looks scary. He is, Rebecca agreed softly. A very good man. Lily's mother called from their Honda Civic, and the girl grabbed her spelling test back, gave Rebecca one more quick hug, and ran off, already chattering about the A+ sticker and how she was going to put it on the refrigerator. Rebecca found herself walking across the street, drawn by something she couldn't quite name. Or maybe didn't want to name yet, so soon after everything. Hey, she said softly as she reached Cole's bike. His face lit up, the scarred, rough features transforming into something unexpectedly warm. Hey yourself. How you doing? Better, Rebecca said, and meant it. Good, actually. Really good. Yeah. Cole's smile widened. That's great. You look good. Healthier. I feel healthier. Therapy is helping. The support group is amazing. I had no idea how many other women had gone through similar things. And the new apartment is perfect. Thank you again for helping me find it. Anytime. Cole's voice was gruff, like he was uncomfortable with gratitude. Security holding up okay? Door guy treating you right? Everything's perfect. You worry too much. Part of the job, Cole said, but his eyes were warm. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the afternoon sun warm on their faces, kids' voices carrying from the playground. Then Rebecca gathered every bit of courage she'd been building over 3 months of therapy and support groups and learning to be strong again. There's a teacher appreciation dinner next Friday, she said, the words coming out in a rush before she could chicken out. At Pearl's Diner, actually. Would you want to come? As my guest? Cole's surprise was evident, his eyebrows going up. You sure about that? I'm not exactly PTA material. Might scare the other teachers. You're hero material, Rebecca corrected, her voice firm. To me and to Lily. Besides, I think it would be good for people to see that heroes come in all forms. Even leather-wearing, motorcycle riding, tattooed ones. Cole was quiet for a moment, studying her face like he was trying to figure out if she meant it. Then his smile came back, slow and genuine and a little bit shy, which was such an unexpected look on his scarred face that it made Rebecca's heart skip. Then yeah, he said. I'd be honored. 6 months later the classroom was full of the controlled chaos that came with show and tell day. 23 second graders, each desperate to share their treasures, rocks that looked exactly like dinosaur eggs, toys from birthday parties, books about astronauts and princesses and talking animals. Lily Sanchez stood at the front of the class, holding up a photograph. In it, a man sat on a motorcycle that gleamed in the sunshine. Beside him, a woman with dark hair smiled at the camera, really smiled, the kind of smile that reached all the way to her eyes. They stood close together, his arm around her shoulders, both looking happy. This is my friend Cole, Lily announced proudly to her classmates, her voice clear and confident. He's a Hell's Angel, which means he rides motorcycles and wears leather and has lots of tattoos. He looks really scary, like a movie villain or something. A few kids giggled. Some of the boys looked impressed. But he's actually really nice, Lily continued. Last year, I noticed that my teacher, Miss Parker, was being hurt by someone she lived with. She had bruises, and she was scared all the time, and she tried to hide it but I saw. I told the principal, but she didn't believe me. I told my mom, but she said I was making up stories. None of the grown-ups would listen to me because I'm just a kid. The classroom had gone quiet now, kids leaning forward, teachers listening from the back. But then I saw Cole's motorcycle in the parking lot, and I left him a note asking for help. And you know what? He believed me. Lily's voice carried pride and wonder. He and his friend, they watched Miss Parker's house. They documented everything. They built a case. And then they confronted the bad man and made him go away. They saved my teacher. She looked around at her classmates, making eye contact with each one. Cole says heroes come in all sizes, and sometimes the smallest person can have the biggest impact. I think that's true. I was small, but I made a difference. I helped save my teacher's life. She paused, then added with fierce conviction, anyone can make a difference if they're brave enough to speak up, if they're brave enough to ask for help, and if they pay attention to the people around them. The class erupted in applause, kids clapping enthusiastically, some of them cheering. One boy yelled, "That's so cool," and others echoed the sentiment. After school, Lily ran to where Cole was waiting at the curb. He'd parked his truck today instead of the Harley. The truck was more practical for grocery runs, and he'd promised Rebecca he'd pick up supplies for dinner. "I told them about you," Lily announced breathlessly, launching herself at Cole for a hug. "About being a hero. Everyone thought it was so cool." "Kid," Cole crouched down to her level, "I'm not a hero. I just paid attention when nobody else would. You're the one who noticed something wrong. You're the one who asked for help. You're the real hero here." "No," Lily said with the absolute certainty of childhood logic, "that's what heroes do. They pay attention when others don't. They believe people when everyone else says they're wrong. They help when it would be easier to just walk away. That's you." Cole was about to respond when Rebecca appeared, walking across the parking lot with a smile that still made his heart do stupid things even 6 months into whatever this relationship was becoming. She wore jeans and a light sweater, no more long sleeves to hide bruises, no more walking on eggshells. Just Rebecca, confident and healthy and beautiful. "Ready to go home?" she asked, and the way she said, "home," like it was a place they shared, a place that meant safety and warmth, made Cole's chest feel tight in the best possible way. Yeah, he took her hand naturally, easily, the gesture comfortable after months of slowly building trust and connection. "Let's go home." As they walked to his truck, Lily skipping ahead and chattering about tomorrow's field trip to the Science Museum, Cole looked at Rebecca and marveled at how completely his life had changed. 6 months ago he'd been drifting, managing the club's businesses competently but without passion, going through the motions. He'd come to Clearwater for a quick meeting about expanding their motorcycle shop franchise. He'd planned to be here 3 days, max. And then a little girl had left a note on his bike. "You know what's funny?" he said quietly, squeezing Rebecca's hand. "I came to this town for a business deal. Was supposed to be here less than a week. Never expected to find a reason to stay. And now." Rebecca looked up at him, her brown eyes warm. "Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." He stopped walking, turned to face her fully. "All because a brave little girl left a note on my bike. All because she noticed something wrong and refused to stay silent." Rebecca stretched up on her toes and kissed him softly. "Best note anyone's ever written," she said against his lips. Epilogue. Thank you for watching this story, for staying with us through every difficult moment and every triumph. If this tale reminded you to trust your instincts, to speak up when something feels wrong, and to never underestimate the power of paying attention to the people around you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Bike Diaries for more stories that prove heroes are everywhere, that courage comes in all forms, from 8-year-old girls who refuse to stay silent to scarred men on motorcycles who choose to help instead of looking away. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Lily's place? Have you ever noticed something important that others missed? Have you ever had to be brave when it would have been easier to stay quiet? Your story matters. Your voice matters. Share it with us. In the parking lot, Lily climbed into the back seat of Cole's truck, already chattering about tomorrow's field trip, about the planetarium show they'd get to see, about whether there might be real moon rocks on display. Cole and Rebecca exchanged a look over the top of the truck, gratitude, love, wonder at the strange and beautiful way their lives had changed. All because one observant child had refused to stay silent. All because one intimidating stranger had chosen to listen when no one else would. All because sometimes, just sometimes, heroes really do come in the most unexpected packages. And sometimes the smallest voice in the room carries the most important message.